I'm Seth Davis. I work as content creator here at Paperpot Co. And I've been farming for about 12 years now throughout the US and even Canada. I've been using the Paperpot Transplanter system for about 3 years now and have picked up some tips and tricks along the way. And I thought I would share some of those nice Paperpot hacks with you today. So let's get into it. We're going to do no fins. So when that would be appropriate, why you would do that. We're going to talk about skip plates and also team planting, which is an interesting two-person approach to operating the Paperpot transplanter. So no fins. I'm going to talk about when I first had to remove the fins, which was at my farm in Northern California called Winding Road Farms. It was a half-acre cattle ranch and very compacted from grazing, but a lot of really good organic material, really nitrogen rich. It was a great plot, but it was extremely sandy soil. I had previously farmed in Tennessee, where I was working with pretty heavy clay. So it was quite a bit of a learning curve and very new to me to have this incredibly fluffy, sandy soil. When I first started the plot, I had hired a guy with a tractor to just till the whole half acre and then chop up all that organic material. And then I let it rest under silage tarps for about 6 months to just really decompose and break down. And then I built my beds with BCS walk behind tractor with the rotary plow to do some raised beds. And then from there, just kind of shaped them. I was using the precision depth roller, which is basically like the power harrow, but it just allows you to set that tiller very shallow. So you're only working that top, maybe 2 to 3 inches. And I was really conscious of not wanting to pulverize my soil or overwork it, not only for the negative effects of the biology in the soil, but also because it was so fluffy. And if I did that, it would just literally become powder. So I had to be pretty conscious of that. So that's just a little context setting you up to how I had to adjust the transplanter for my context when I first started using it. So when it first arrived straight out of the box, I got it all assembled, was really excited. I had been eyeing these for years and really wanting to use the system. And on this farm, I was a one-man show. So it was the perfect context to put it to work. So I didn't adjust anything. I just left it all factory preset. And my first crop I was getting in the ground was Salanova lettuce. And as I started to pull it through, immediately I could see that all of the transplants were getting buried pretty substantially. So obviously had to stop and wanted to go through the steps that were recommended. I had scoured the internet, watched all the tutorial videos I could find and read up on it. So I knew what to do, but I just had to start working through the troubleshooting steps. So the first step was to just lift up on the handle. And what that does is it pulls that plow that's under the machine up a little bit out of the soil so that it doesn't make that furrow quite as deep, which will make your transplants hopefully not as deep and have less chance of getting buried. So I did that and it helped a little bit, not too much though. So I had to move on to the next step, which was to raise up the wheels under the handles of the machine. So I did that, kept raising them up, still too deep, all the way to the fully extended position where that plow is going to be at the shallowest setting underneath because it's lifted up out of the ground. And still it was getting buried. So moved on to the third step, which is to spread apart those fins at the end of the machine there. So I did that, just got a 10 millimeter socket, loosened it all the way and just pulled those things as far apart as I could. And still, it was not as bad as when I started, but it was still to the point where I would have to go back at the end of a row and basically brush off the soil that was partially burying some of the transplants. So after that, I just said, let's be done with it and completely remove the fins. And when I did that, it was finally working the way that it should. So I have a little video that I did because I was so excited that it was working. So you can see just the weight of the tamper wheels going along the side of the paper chains was enough to just push in that real fluffy soil just to the point where it was about equal with the top of the paper chain and the level of the soil, which really got it perfect. So that helped me. If you have a similar context, I highly recommend going no fins. It works great. And once you get it set up, from there on out, I didn't have to tweak with it anymore. I could really just leave it as is. And, my soil texture was pretty consistent over the whole plot. So I didn't have to worry about it again after that. All right, let's move on to skip plates. So skip plates refer to the top plate of our quick click drop seeder. And we do a custom plate, we call them skip plates, where it allows you to seed just every other cell in the chain, or in a tray rather. And this is going to come in handy when you're planting crops that require wider in-row spacings. So either 8-inch or 12-inch in-row spacings are the most common. And you achieve this by seeding every other cell in a 4-inch or 6-inch chain. This is most common with head lettuce, which is 8-inch in-row spacing typically, or cabbage, which is often 12-inch in-row spacing, depending on the cultivar that you're working with. So you can do this obviously by just doing it by hand, which is going to take quite a bit of time and then negating your whole time-saving Paperpot system. Or you can also tape over the holes that would allow you to get every other cell. But that does take time as well, and it's not as accurate, and there's just issues that go along with it. So if you really want to make it a smooth workflow, the best would be to custom order some skip plates if it's going to be a regular part of your crop rotation. On our website, we have some really nice graphs here that can help you get a good visual understanding of how the cells in the paper chain are laid out so that you can understand how you need to seed the tray in order to get at every other cell. Here's another great one that shows you exactly where the seeds need to go to achieve every other cell spacing. This is for the 4-inch or 6-inch chain. They're both the same in terms of how you seed them. And then here's another one that we have available that shows if you wanted to do every third cell. So that could even achieve wider spacing. So with a 4-inch chain, that would give you 12 inches between plants, and with the 6-inch chain up to 18 inches between plants. All right. Moving on now to team planting. This is a really interesting approach that I believe was conceived of by a farmer named John Hoffer at the farm that I worked at last season up at Wise Earth Farm in British Columbia, Canada. And the advantage is that it allows the operator to just completely focus on pulling the transplanter. If you've operated the Paperpot Transplanter, you know that it's kind of a dance between looking where you're going, but also looking back to always be conscious to make sure that those paper chains are going in correctly, that there wasn't a tear, or that the machine didn't get clogged. So you're trying to kind of focus on two things at once. So this just allows the operator to just look straight ahead and go. And then the second person is doing all the other things. They're monitoring that nothing is getting clogged, that the paper chains are going in the way they're supposed to. And they're also taking care of fetching trays when it's time to swap out, which is another thing that takes time if you're just flying solo. And something else that I observed was that it just boosted the morale in the crew. Most people, I would say, not all people, but most people enjoy working with someone else and doing kind of a team approach. And so if you're doing that, you're getting the job done twice as fast, and you're getting the whole planting done really fast. And you're also, working with another person and developing a rhythm and a flow. And it worked pretty well, at least for the crew at Wise Earth where I was. So we'll go deeper into the roles here. So person one, we refer to as the operator. Person two would be the feeder. The operator is in charge, like I said, of pulling the transplanter, and then the feeder does everything else, delivering the trays as they are needed, starting the chains, tearing the chains, and then also counting blanks as they're walking the row. I'll show more about this in the next slide here. So this is the general workflow. Operator positions the transplanter at the beginning of a row as they ordinarily would, even if they're working alone. But the feeder starts the chain, pulls it through the channel, and they hold it into the ground. So this eliminates the need for a landscape pin, which a lot of farmers do to hold it in place, or even kind of hand bury the beginning of the chain to make sure that it's held in position and there's enough tension to start the machine as you pull it through the bed. The feeder will also check for blanks and keep count as they're walking behind the operator. Blanks are referring to those cells where there might have been failed germination for whatever reason. Of course, the goal is to get as good or near perfect germination as you can, but the reality is there's often going to be some blanks. So as the feeder is walking behind the operator in the row, they're just keeping a mental tally of how many blanks, if any, they see. And then at the end of the row, they'll communicate that to the operator. And then they'll tear off the appropriate number of cells in the paper chain and just leave it at the end of that row. And then at the end of the whole planting, the operator and the feeder will work together and just very quickly go and fill in all those gaps and then move on to the next bed. It really works pretty well. I enjoy the process. Here's a nice aerial video at Wise Earth Farm with John Hoffer and a crew member, so you can get a nice visual here. So here you can see they're in the middle of a row. The feeder has delivered a new tray, and he is getting it all positioned and just pulling the beginning of the chain out. And then she takes it from there, pulls it through the channel, and holds it in place in the soil to be correctly spaced from where they left off. And then she walks behind and follows to the end of the bed, keeping count in her head if there's any blanks. Then she tears the chain, and all he has to do is lift it up, pivot, rotate that around, and get it positioned for the next row. And here's another thing that is really nice when you have a second person. You can see she kind of put her body weight into it and pushed forward on the machine. And what that was doing was getting that plow on the bottom of the machine deeper into the soil to create that furrow at the very beginning of the bed, which is often hard to do if you're working alone. You'll typically have to kind of dig it out with your hand a little bit and tuck in the chain. So there, she teared the chain again, rotates it around. And there she goes again. You see how she pushed it in? And that just creates that nice deep furrow even at the beginning of the bed, so the chain just rests in the way that it's supposed to. And then following behind, counting blanks if there are any. And then you can see the tray is almost finished. So she would break off at that point and get the new tray. Ideally, you would want to be back to the operator right at the moment that that tray is empty, so there's no lag time, and you can keep your flow moving pretty quickly. Overall, works well. It's enjoyable. If you think your crew might enjoy it, if you think it might work for your context, then I would say definitely give it a shot. That's all I've got for you today. So we went over no fins and when that makes sense and how to do it. Skip plates, those can be ordered through our website if you need to do wider in-row spacing, and team planting. Hope this is beneficial to some of you out there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to work with you. Thanks.